Picture a man so rich that kings borrow money from him and hate him for it. Now fill his house with locked chests, iron-banded, triple-keyed, and give each key to a different servant so no single one of them can rob him. Add a private chapel where he prays every morning to be forgiven for the way he made his fortune. A cellar of wine he never drinks because drink loosens tongues. And a ledger, a single leather-bound book that is worth more than the entire village you were born in. That's a medieval millionaire, not a lord, not a knight. A man whose grandfather shoveled dung and who now owns pieces of ships he's never seen, sailing on seas he will never cross, carrying wool sheared from sheep on islands he cannot pronounce. A man who could buy a castle in the morning and spends the evening arguing about the price of a candle. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists gawking at palaces. We're living it. One winter, one boy, inside the house of one of the richest men in Christendom, everything he would have seen, smelled, heard, and survived. So, I make these history stories and, honestly, I have no clue if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just weirdos who like hearing about ink-stained fingers and the smell of unwashed money. Either way, subscribe if you want, get comfortable. Here we go. You have ruined a letter worth 11,000 florins, and the man who owns it will be awake in 4 hours. That is the whole of your world right now. Not the city outside, not God, not your mother in the hills of the Mugello. Just this, a sheet of paper on a sloped writing desk, a candle burning down to a thumb's width, and a blot of black ink wide as a fingernail sitting in the middle of the figure that matters most, the figure that tells the house of Francesco di Marco, merchant of Prato and Florence, exactly how much wool is waiting in a warehouse in Southampton, and exactly how much money must move through Bruges and Barcelona to pay for it. 11,000 florins. You have seen a man work an entire year, dawn to dark, 6 days a week, for 12 florins. This one blotted number is 900 of those years. Your name is Niccolo. You are 16 years old. You've been in this house for 7 months, and you know, with the cold certainty of a boy who has watched it happen to others, that clerks have been dismissed for less than this. Dismissed means the street. The street in Florence in December of 1397 means begging outside a church door with the frost eating your toes, because there are 10 trained clerks for every stool in every counting house in this city, and every one of them has a cousin, and you have no one. The counting house is silent except for 2 sounds. The first is the candle. It doesn't burn quietly, not this cheap tallow one. It hisses, a small wet sputter every few seconds, and it stinks, a greasy mutton smell that has soaked into your hair and your one good shirt. The second sound is your own breathing, which is too fast. Your hands are so cold you can barely feel the pen. That's how the blot happened. You were on the 4th hour of copying the fire in the brazier long since gone to grey ash, because charcoal costs money, and Messer Francesco counts the charcoal, and your fingers, stiff as twigs, shook at exactly the wrong moment. The quill spat, the ink fell, and now you are staring at it the way a man stares at a wound, waiting to find out how deep it goes. Here is what you cannot do. You cannot throw the sheet away and start again, because paper is imported from the mills at Fabriano, and every sheet in this house is counted, and a missing sheet will be noticed by Ser Lapo, the head clerk, who notices everything, who once noticed that a barrel of Provençal almonds was 11 almonds light. You cannot leave the blot because letters from this house travel to Avignon, to Genoa, to Valencia, to Bruges. and a blotted letter tells every merchant who touches it that Francesco Di Marco employs careless boys, and in this trade, in this century, reputation is not decoration. Reputation is credit. Credit is the entire business. A man whose letters look sloppy is a man whose accounts might be sloppy, and a man whose accounts might be sloppy is a man you do not lend to, and a man no one lends to is dead. Not poor, dead. That is how they talk about it. Fallito, fallen. So you do the third thing, the dangerous thing. You take the small knife from the desk, the one used for trimming quills, and you begin to scrape. This is a real skill, and you're about to find out whether you have it. Paper in 1397 is rag paper, made from pounded linen, and good rag paper has a surface like fine skin. If your hand is steady, you can shave the ink off in whisper-thin layers, dust it away, burnish the roughened patch with a smooth stone, and rewrite over it so cleanly that only a man holding the sheet against strong light will ever know. If your hand is not steady, you will tear through, and then there is no hiding anything from anyone. You breathe on your fingers, you wipe the blade on your sleeve. Somewhere below you, deep in the house, a floorboard creaks. Just the building settling in the cold, you tell yourself. Just oak shrinking in the December air. But your heart slams anyway, because Messer Francesco is famous, genuinely famous from here to Avignon for walking his own house at night, checking shutters, checking locks, checking clerks. The blade touches the paper, scrape. A sound like a mouse in a wall. Scrape. Black dust gathers in a tiny drift. Scrape. Your whole body is bent into your fingertips now. Your shoulders burning. Your breath held so long that spots swim at the edge of the candlelight. The ink pales, greys, ghosts. You blow softly, the way you'd blow on a baby's face, and the dust lifts and scatters, and underneath it the paper is intact, roughened, furred slightly, but whole. You press the burnishing stone flat and rub in small circles, and the fibres lie down, and the surface closes like healing skin. Then you dip the pen, carefully, carefully, wiping the nib on the inkhorn's rim twice, and you rewrite the number. 11,000 florins. In the tidy mercantile hand Sir Lapo beat into you through the autumn, and the figure sits there, clean and confident, as if the last half-hour never happened. You sit back. Your spine crackles like green firewood, and only now do you notice that your feet, in their thin shoes, have gone completely numb against the stone floor, and that the church bells of San Pier Maggiore are ringing somewhere out in the dark. Ringing the hour before matins, which means it is deep in the black middle of the night, which means you have been copying letters for 6 hours, and you will be expected at this same desk, washed and combed and alert, when the house wakes, and the house wakes early. This is the first thing you learned here. The richest man you have ever seen, a man who could sleep on swan's down until noon every day for the rest of his life, rises before his own servants, in the dark, in the cold, because, as he says, and he says it often, to everyone, in a voice like gravel turning in a jar, the man who sleeps does not earn. Welcome to the house of a medieval millionaire. It is nothing like you thought it would be. You had thought, back in the Mugello, back when your uncle arranged this position, and your mother wept into her apron with pride that rich men lived softly. You had imagined feasts, silk cushions, idleness perfumed with rose water. You had imagined, God forgive you, that some of that softness might drift down to you, the way crumbs drift down a table. 7 months have taught you the truth, and the truth is this. The great merchant houses of Italy are not palaces of pleasure. They are machines of anxiety. Every florin in them is emotion, always, day and night, moving as wool and alum and slaves and spices and paper and salt and insurance and debt across 4,000 miles of dangerous water and worse roads. And the man at the centre of it all does not recline. He sits up half the night writing letters in his own cramped hand, hundreds of them, thousands of them, letters to his agents in Genoa and Pisa and Barcelona and Mallorca and Bruges, letters that begin, always, with the same words. Words you've copied so many times they run through your dreams. In the name of God and of profit. That is the phrase. That is actually the phrase, written at the head of the ledgers, and no one in this house finds it strange. God and profit, in that order, on the same line. Because to Messer Francesco and every man like him they are not enemies but uneasy partners, chained together at the wrist, dragging each other toward the grave. You pinch out the candle. The dark comes down like a lid. You climb the back stairs by feel, one hand on the cold plaster, counting steps because the 14th one groans, and Zerlapo sleeps light. The attic room where the junior clerks sleep is under the roof tiles, and the roof tiles are the only thing between you and the December sky, and you can hear the wind working at them. A dry, rattling shuffle, like someone dealing cards very slowly overhead. 2 other boys share the room. Matteo, 14, from Prato, who came with a recommendation from the master's own notary and never lets anyone forget it, is a humped shape under his blanket, whistling faintly through a broken nose. Giovanni, 17, from Pisa, sleeps on his back with his hands folded on his chest like a tomb effigy, which the rest of you find unsettling and have told him so, repeatedly to no effect. Your bed is a straw pallet and 1 blanket of coarse garbo wool, the cheap grade, the stuff the house sells to labourers, and you know it's the cheap grade because you've spent 7 months learning to know wool with your fingertips in the dark, which is a real thing clerks in this trade learn to do, and this blanket is short-stapled, harsh, badly fulled. You know this the way you now know a dozen useless intimate things about the empire of goods flowing through this house. You lie down without undressing. Nobody undresses in December. You pull the blanket to your chin, and your feet begin the slow, stabbing ache of coming back to life, and you stare up at the rafters and do what you do every night, which is arithmetic. Not the house's arithmetic. Yours. You're paid nothing. That is the arrangement. That is every young clerk's arrangement. You are fed, housed, clothed once a year and trained. And the training is the wage, because a boy who spends 5 years in the counting house of Francesco Di Marco comes out able to keep books alla Veneziana, in the double entry that is the sewest and sharpest tool in the world, able to draft a bill of exchange in 4 currencies, able to smell rot in a bale of wool through the wrapping. And that boy can find a stool in any fondico from London to Constantinople. That is the wage. The future is the wage. You repeat this to yourself on the nights when your stomach growls, which is most nights, because the future is thin eating. Sleep takes you somewhere in the middle of the multiplication, and then the bell of the house is ringing, a handbell brass swung in the courtyard by Monna Tessa, the housekeeper, with the joyless vigour of a woman who has been awake for an hour already. And it is not morning, not anything an honest person would call morning. It is a grey-black smear at the edge of the shutter, and your body comes up off the pallet before your mind does, because 7 months have trained it like a dog. The cold in the room has teeth. Your breath is smoke. The water in the basin by the door has a skin of ice on it, thin as a communion wafer, and you punch through it with 2 knuckles and scrub your face, and the shock of it is a full-body event, a gasp you can't hold in. And behind you, Matteo makes the same sound a moment later, and Giovanni, tomb effigy Giovanni, makes no sound at all, which is somehow worse. Dressing is fast because dressing is mostly already done. You add the outer tunic, decent grey-brown cloth, house-made, house-marked. Because the 3 of you walking through Florence are walking advertisements and Messer Francesco knows it. And you drag a wooden comb through your hair until it lies flat. Because Ser Lapo inspects hair. He inspects hair, fingernails and shoes, every morning in that order, and a boy with ink under his nails past the first knuckle is fined a day of wine. Appearances are not vanity here. Appearances are solvency. A slovenly clerk suggests a slovenly ledger. You have heard the master say it. I can read a house's books in its doorkeeper's collar. Down the stairs, skip the 14th, through the passage where the walls sweat cold and into the courtyard, and here is the house of a millionaire at the hour before dawn, and this is what it actually looks like. It looks like work. It sounds like work. It smells like work. The courtyard is small, stone-flagged, ringed by loggia arches, and every arch has something happening under it. 2 porters are wrestling a bale of wool onto a hand-barrow, and a bale of English wool is not a sack, it's a monster, sewn into canvas, packed hard as timber, and the men move it with hooks and grunts and a rhythm of curses so ancient and polished it's almost liturgy. The smell of it reaches you across the courtyard. Lanolin, that heavy sheep grease sweetness, and under it dust, and under that the sour tang of the canvas itself, which has crossed the sea and been rained on in 3 countries. Near the well, a kitchen girl is scouring a copper pot with sand and vinegar, and the sound is a rhythmic granular rasp, shink, 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 and the vinegar reek cuts through the wool grease like a knife through fat. Above, on the 2nd floor gallery, someone is beating a carpet, an actual carpet from the east, worth more than a farm, and each blow sends down a soft grey snow of dust that turns gold when it crosses the one lit window. And in the middle of it, already, is the master. Francesco Di Marco is 62 years old. He is not tall, he is not fat. That surprised you most at the beginning, that the richest man you'd ever seen has the lean, knotted build of the tradesman's son he is, a body made by 50 years of standing at counters and walking to warehouses. He wears dark red-brown cloth, good but not gorgeous, and if you passed him in the street you might take him for a prosperous notary, until you saw the eyes. The eyes of the fortune. Pale, quick, unresting, they move over the courtyard the way your fingers move over wool, reading everything. The bale, the barrow, the porter's hooks, the carpet dust, the kitchen girl's pot. You. Especially you. The Bruges letters, he says. No good morning. There is never a good morning. There is only the business resumed, as if sleep were a brief and regrettable interruption in one continuous 60-year working day. Copied Messere, all 4, sealed after Ser Lapo reads them. He looks at you 1 second longer than the answer requires. This is a thing he does, and every soul in the house knows it, and no one has ever gotten used to it. 62 years of finding out that men lie has taught him to hold the silence open, like a trap left politely ajar to see what falls in. You keep your face still. The scraped patch on the Southampton letter burns in your mind like a coal. He cannot know. He cannot possibly know. The boy from the Mugello, he says to the courtyard generally, copies until matins and stands straight at prime. Matteo, are you hearing this? Matteo behind you mutters something loyal. The master is already moving away, already talking to the porters about the bail, already someone else's problem, and you stand there in the cold with your heart tapping and a small, shameful warmth spreading through your chest, because that half sentence thrown over a shoulder in front of the others is the first praise he has ever given you, and you hate how much it matters, and it matters completely. Breakfast is bread and a cup of watered wine, taken standing in the kitchen doorway, because clerks do not sit at the family table and do not sit in the kitchen either. Clerks hover, chewing, in the borderlands. The bread is yesterday's dense, with a sourness that means the flour was cut with bean meal. And here is the thing that took you months to understand. This is not because the house cannot afford better bread. This house could eat white manchy loaves off silver every day until judgment. The bread is bean cut because Messer Francesco was born poor in Prato, orphaned at 13 by the great pestilence of 1348. His father, his mother, 2 brothers, all dead in one summer, the whole family gone like a candle pinched out, leaving him a house, a scrap of land, 47 florins, and nobody. And a boy who starts like that never ever again trusts the bottom of the barrel. The bean-cut bread is not poverty. It is armour. Every florin not eaten is a florin standing guard. You gnaw the crust, and the cold makes your teeth ache, and Monna Tessa slaps a second piece into your hand without looking at you, which is how kindness works in this kitchen, and the day begins. The counting house proper, the scrittoio, is one long room on the ground floor with 2 windows onto the street, and the windows are the first thing anyone notices because they are glazed. Glass, actual glass panes, small greenish rounds set in lead, and light comes through them the colour of shallow seawater, and in the whole street of your childhood there was not one piece of window glass, and in this room there are 2 windows of it, and they exist for a purely practical reason. Ink freezes, fingers stiffen, and a clerk working by a shuttered window in winter makes errors. The glass is not luxury. Nothing in this house is ever only luxury. The glass is error prevention with a price tag. Ser Lapo is already at the master desk, and Ser Lapo at his desk looks like something grown there. A lean grey man of 50 with a spine curved into a permanent question mark by 30 years of bending over paper, and fingers stained so deep the ink has become part of the skin. A bruised blue-black that no pumice will lift. He has laid out the day the way he lays out every day. On your desk, a stack of letters received to be entered and filed, a stack to be copied, the small ledger of household expenses, and your penknife, moved half an inch from where you left it, because he checks the desks each dawn and he wants you to know he checks. You sit. The stool is oak, worn into a shallow gloss by the boys before you. You uncap the inkhorn and the smell rises, oak gall and iron and gum arabic, a smell like wet rust and old wine, the smell that will live in your clothes for the rest of your working life. And you take up the first letter and you enter the machinery. And I need you to understand what this machinery is, because this is the part nobody imagines when they imagine a medieval millionaire. There is no bank vault in this house stuffed with gold. There is a strong box, yes, iron-banded, bolted through the floor of the master's own bedchamber, because he sleeps on top of his cash like a dragon of very modest hoard. But the coin in it on any given day might be a few hundred florins, running money, nothing. The fortune The real fortune, the tens upon tens of thousands, does not exist in any one place. It exists as entries. It exists as wool in Southampton that has been bought but not shipped, as cloth in Valencia that has been shipped but not sold, as credit in Bruges, as debt in Genoa, as a 1/8 share of a galley currently somewhere on the water between Palma and Porto Pisano, as insurance underwritten on other men's cargoes, as accounts receivable from a cardinal who is slow to pay and cannot be pressed. The fortune is a shape made of paper, and the ledgers in this room, the great books bound in white leather, each one titled in the master's own hand, in the name of God and of profit, are not records of the fortune. They are the fortune. If the house burned, and the books burned with it, the wool would still sit in Southampton and the cloth in Valencia, and it would belong effectively to no one, because no man alive could reconstruct from memory who owed what to whom across 11 cities and 4 currencies and 7 years of compounding transactions. This is why the books never leave the room. This is why the room has the only door in the house with 3 locks. This is why, when fire broke out 2 streets away in October, the master's first order, before the plate, before the silk, before, God help them, Monna Margherita's jewels, was the books to the cellar. You are learning the new bookkeeping, the double entry, and it is genuinely new. Men your master's age remember when accounts were kept as narrative, as a sort of financial diary, and disputes were settled by comparing stories. The double entry is not a story. It is a machine of 2 columns, debit and credit, and every transaction strikes both columns at once, like a hammer hitting 2 strings, and at any moment the columns can be summed and must agree, and if they do not agree somewhere in the paper, there is an error or a thief, and the books themselves will hunt him. The first time Sir Lapo showed you a trial balance close, hundreds of entries, months of trade, 4 currencies, resolving to agreement down to the last denaro. You felt something you had only felt before in church. You didn't tell anyone that, but you suspect, from the way Sir Lapo's ruined hand smoothed the page flat, that he felt it once too, and never stopped. The morning's letters teach you the shape of the world. From Genoa, alum prices firming, because the Turks are squeezing the mines at Phocaea, and alum matters because without alum dye will not bite wool, and without dye there is no cloth trade, and without the cloth trade there is no Florence. From Barcelona, a partner reports Catalan saffron bought at 42 florins the load, and reports also in the same breath, in the same ink, that his wife has been delivered of a son, praise God, and that the pepper from the last galley was found wet damaged in 3 sacks, and the insurers are disputing. Birth and pepper and spoilage, 1 paragraph. From Avignon, the branch there has sold sword belts, painted panels, straw hats, and 2 chests of Milanese armour to the papal court, because a great merchant house sells everything, anything, whatever moves. You have entered in 7 months transactions for wool, wheat, wine, salt, slaves. You stopped the first time over that entry, a Tartar girl of about 12 years, sold in Genoa, and Sir Lapo watched you stop, and said nothing, and the entry went into the book like all the others, and it sits in your memory like a stone in a shoe. And this too is what a medieval fortune is made of, and the master will pray about it in his chapel, and the column will still balance. And from Bruges, the letter that matters, the one the whole house has been waiting for, the wool fleet is gathering, 60 sacks of fine Cotswold, the master's share, to come by galley in the spring convoy, if the seas allow, if the English allow, if God allows, in the margin, in the Bruges agent's hurried hand. This sea this winter is a wolf. You enter it all. Your pen scratches. The glass windows green the light. Somewhere in the wall a mouse works at something, with a tiny dry industry that matches yours. Your right hand, by the second hour, has taken on its permanent daytime shape. The writing claw, thumb and 2 fingers cramped around the quill, and there is a callus on your middle finger, hard and yellow as horn, that you did not have in the spring, and will have now until you die. This is the body of the trade. Not the porter's back or the dyer's boiled arms, a claw, a callus, a curved spine, and eyes that will be spent like coins and gone by 50. At mid-morning, the master comes through, as he does, unannounced, and stands behind the desks reading over shoulders, and the room's temperature changes the way a field changes when a hawk crosses it. He stops behind you. You keep writing. He reaches past you. His sleeve smells of wax and cold air, and touches one entry with a blunt fingernail. This price. 42 the load, Messere. Barcelona. The saffron. Last year. Your mind sprints. You copied last year's Barcelona book in October, all of it, as an exercise. Ser Lapo said the exercise was penmanship. You understand suddenly that it was never penmanship. 38, Messere. 38.5 by autumn. A silence. The hawk hangs. And why is a man happy, he says, to hear that a thing he must buy has grown dearer? The room is listening without appearing to listen. Matteo's pen has stopped. You feel the answer arrive from somewhere below thought, from 7 months of entries flowing through your hands like water through a mill race. Because we hold saffron already, Messere, bought at the old price, in Avignon. It is worth more this morning than when we bought it. The pale eyes rest on you. 1 second. 2. The Mugello, he says, in the tone of a man conceding a point to an opponent, grows more than chestnuts after all, and he is gone. On into the warehouse, and Ser Lapo does not look up, but the corner of his mouth moves a fraction of an inch, which from Ser Lapo is a standing ovation, and you bend back to the page so no one will see your face. Understand what has just happened, because it is the whole engine of this world. There are no schools for this. There is no book that teaches it. There is only the house, the bottega, the fondaco, and the slow apprenticeship of copying and entering and being questioned without warning, and the terrifying old man who is at once your employer, your examiner, your jailer, and the only ladder out of the life you were born into. Every great merchant in Italy was once a boy on a stool being ambushed with questions. The system is a forge. Most iron that goes in comes out as nails. Now and then it comes out as a blade. You're not thinking any of this. You're thinking, he knew my valley. He knows where every boy in this house comes from. Of course he does. He knows the origin of everything in inventory. At midday, Ser Lapo folds a letter, seals it with a housemark pressed into green wax. Green, always green, so that any factor from London to Beirut can pick the master's correspondence out of a pile by colour alone, and holds it out to you without looking up. The Arte della Lana, the consul's office, the one by the Campanile. Wait for an answer. Speak to no one on the way, stop for nothing, and if anyone asks you what house you serve, tell them, and stand straight when you say it. And this is how you get the thing you secretly hunger for more than food, which is the street. Florence in December at midday, under a sky like wet slate. You step out of the doorway and the city hits you the way it always hits you, all at once, in the face like a wave. The cold first, damp river cold that gets in under the tunic at the throat, and then the noise, and then the smell. And the smell is the city's true name. Wood smoke from 10,000 fires, and under it horse dung and human dung, and under that the sharp ammonia reek drifting up from the dyer's quarter by the river, and threading through all of it. From a fry shop 3 doors down, hot oil and chickpea batter, and your stomach clenches like a fist because bread and watered wine was 5 hours ago. The street is a single moving argument. Porters with baskets on their backs the size of coffins, bent forward at an angle that looks like falling. A notary's servant leading a mule loaded with document chests, shouting "make way" in a bored sing-song he has clearly been shouting his whole life. 2 Franciscans, a water seller, a gang of wool carders coming off shift, and you know them at 30 feet without seeing their faces, because you know them by their hands and their coughing, hands swollen and cracked from working greasy fleece in cold water, and the cough, that dry double cough, cough, that men get from breathing wool dust 12 hours a day in shuttered rooms, and they're 25 years old and they walk like 50. And here, listen, because this is the thing to understand about the country of the medieval millionaire. Every florin of the fortune you spend your days recording passes at some point through hands like those. Florence at this moment holds maybe 55,000 souls, rebuilt from the great dying, and something like 1 soul in 3 is fed, directly or indirectly, by wool. The city buys raw fleece from England and Spain, the finest wool in the world, and turns it into finished cloth so good that sultans wear it, and the turning is done in 100 small hells. The washing sheds by the Arno where boys stand in the river in December treading fleece, the carding shops full of dust and that cough, the spinning given out to women in the countryside at rates that would make you cry if you hadn't entered the rates yourself, in the ledger, in your own hand. The dye vats where men stir boiling woad and madder with poles, arms stained to the elbow in blues and reds that never wash off, so that a dyer's trade is written on his skin like a sentence. The tenterfields where finished cloth is stretched on hooks in the wind. 30,000 people more or less feeding one industry, and the industry is owned, the wool bought, the wages set, the cloth sold, the profit kept, by a few hundred families of the Arte della Lana, the Wool Guild, whose consul's office you're walking to right now with green wax in your fist. The workers have a name for themselves, the lowest of them, the carders and beaters who own nothing, not even their tools. Chompy. 20 years ago. You've heard this told in the kitchen, in lowered voices, the way people tell about a flood. The Chompy rose, took the city, actually took it, held the palace, made a wool carder head of the government for a few impossible weeks in the summer of 1378, and then the guilds closed ranks, and the rising was broken, and the leaders were hanged, and the wage earners were shoved back down the stairs, and the doors were locked behind them, and every rich man in Florence has slept with one ear open ever since. Messer Francesco keeps to no faction, and flatters every government and gives to every church, and part of that you have come to understand is piety, and part of it is the same instinct that bolts the strongbox to the floor. A fortune in this city is a thing built on a crowd, and the crowd remembers. You pass the fry shop. You do not stop. You are told to stop for nothing, and besides you have in total, in the world, 3 small coins sewn into your hem, and they are for an emergency. And hunger is not an emergency. Hunger is Tuesday. The street funnels you toward the centre, and then the buildings open, and there it is. And no matter how many times it happens again. The Duomo. The Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, begun before your grandfather was born, its marble flanks striped green and white and pink, vast beyond the sense of the word, and still unfinished, because at the east end, where the choir stands, the walls simply stop, open to the sky, around a hole in the world 11 years' walk across, the drum of a dome that no man alive knows how to build. That is not a figure of speech. The city decreed a dome wider than anything raised since ancient Rome, wider than the Pantheons, and decreed it without possessing the knowledge to construct it, on the pure Florentine conviction that the money would eventually summon the genius. The money is in place. The genius this December is a boy about your age across town, apprenticed to a goldsmith, name of Filippo, and no one knows yet, least of all him. The dome will rise in your lifetime. You will be an old man when they close it, and you will stand in this piazza with your grandchildren and tell them you remember when it was a hole in the sky, and they will not believe you. Beside the cathedral, Giotto's campanile goes up in coloured marble, like something from a dream of order, and beside that is the consul's office of the Wool Guild, because of course it is. The guild built the cathedral, runs the cathedral works. The house of God in this city is a line item in the wool trade's books, and nobody at all thinks that strange. Inside, a clerk older and better dressed than you takes the letter, reads the green seal, and his manner adjusts itself by 2 degrees of respect, which is a thing you feel in your chest like a small warm coin. You wait on a bench against the wall. The room smells of wax and wet wool and coin metal. Through an inner door you can hear the consul's voices, and you catch the words in every third sentence. The galleys, the convoy, English license, insurance, Porto Pisano. The same words that fill your own days, the words of the sea, because Florence, this whole roaring inland city of cloth and stone, lives or dies by ships it cannot even see from its own walls, and everyone from the consuls down to the boys treading fleece in the freezing Arno is, whether they know it or not, waiting on the weather in the Gulf of Lions. The answer comes back sealed. You carry it home through the failing light, past the fry shop, whose smell has gotten worse, meaning better, past a beggar with no feet on a wheeled board outside the Badia, and you look at him the length of 1 step, and you think about the master's 47 florins and dead family at 13, and about how thin, how truly paper thin, the floor is under every single person in this city, and you walk faster, and you stand straight at the door of the house and say your business, and the porter lets you into the warmth and the wool smell and the lamplight, and something in your chest, unbidden, ridiculous, says, "Home." Evening in the house of a millionaire is the sound of shutters. They close in sequence, front of the house to back, and each pair has its own voice. The warehouse shutters boom like a drum. The scrittoio's glazed windows get their oak covers seated with a double thud, and then the iron bar dropped across. Chunk, a sound you feel in your breastbone. And the porter walks the circuit with the lamp, and behind him the house draws itself in like a fist closing, because night in a medieval city is not evening entertainment. Night is siege. There are no watchmen worth the name. There is no light in the streets but what the moon spares. A rich man's house after dark is a strong box with people in it, and everyone in Florence knows which houses are worth breaking, and this one is near the top of the list. Supper for the household is at the long table off the kitchen. Bean soup with a hock in it for flavour, bread, a ration of wine each, and on this night, because it is a vigil eve, salted eel, which Matteo despises and trades to you for half your wine, and this transaction is conducted with the solemn efficiency of two boys who have been trading dinner components for months and have reached a stable market. Down the table, the porters eat like siege engines. Monna Tessa presides. The talk is the eternal talk of servants, who's been shorted, who is courting, whose cousin saw a two-headed calf near Empoli, which is agreed to signify something, opinions differing as to what. At the head of the house, in the smaller room with the fireplace, the master eats with Monna Margherita. And about Monna Margherita you must understand this. She runs everything you can see. The master's empire is the paper world, the 11 cities. Hers is the physical one. The stores, the servants, the salting and smoking and mending, the guests, the wine, the linen. And she runs it with a competence that has a temper folded inside it like a blade in a cloth. She's a gentlewoman by birth, from a family that had names and lost money, married at 16 to a rich man of no family at all, and the marriage is a working partnership with old scar tissue in it. Childless, which in this world is a private grief lived in public, and out of it the house has filled up sideways with other people's children. Wards, nieces, a small girl the master acknowledges with the gesture and pays for with a regularity that answers the question no one asks aloud. When the master is away in Prato or Pisa, Margherita writes to him. You have carried the letters, and hers is the only correspondence that comes into this house which the clerks are forbidden to read. And Ser Lapo says, without expression, that this is because she is the only correspondent the master fears. After supper, the clerks get the 1 hour that belongs to them. Giovanni mends his shoe with an awl and waxed thread, entirely content, humming one note. Matteo tries to teach you a card game whose rules change according to whether Matteo is winning. And through the wall, from the master's study, comes the sound you fall asleep to every night of your life now, and will hear in your head 40 years from now on your own deathbed, the scratch of his pen. He writes every night, 2 hours, 3 sometimes to matins, in his own hand, which is terrible, a racing, jagged merchant scrawl abbreviated to the bone, to his branch managers, his partners, his notary, his wife when she's at the other house. And the letters are not only business. That's the thing you learned when Ser Lapo first set you to filing the copies. They are everything. Instructions on the price of alum. And then, same page, same breath. Anxiety about his soul. Complaints about his health. His sleep. The pain in his side. Reminders to give 16 florins to the poor of such a parish. Fury at a partner's carelessness, then remorse for the fury, then a request for prayers, then the price of pepper. The richest man you will ever know conducts, nightly, in ink, a single unending argument with himself about whether any of it, the wool, the galleys, the 11 cities, the whole roaring machine, will weigh anything at all when he stands, as he says in letter after letter before the judge who cannot be bribed. Because here is the crack running down the middle of every great fortune of this age, and you must feel it to understand these men. The church teaches, plainly, repeatedly, from every pulpit the masters ever sat under, that lending money at interest is a sin. Usury, not sharp practice. Sin, mortal sin. The sin of selling time, which belongs to God alone. And the master's world runs on credit the way a mill runs on water. There is no trade without lending, no lending without return. And so the entire commercial civilization of Italy has grown up inside a contradiction, like a tree grown through a fence, and the fence is inside the wood now. and every merchant carries it in him. They soften it with lawyers' inventions. Profit disguised as exchange rate difference, as gift, as penalty for late payment. And the theologians argue, and the merchants employ the theologians who argue best. But at night, in the study, with the shutters barred, the old men know what they know. Their fathers told them where usurers go. There is a fresco in this very city in Santa Croce, where the damned money-lender's purse hangs around his neck in hell, and the master has seen it, and made his donations, and gone home, and written 3 more hours of letters in the name of God and of profit. So he gives. This is the other half of the machine, and it is not hypocrisy, or not only. It is a man bailing a boat he cannot stop rowing. Alms every feast day, counted and recorded like any other transaction. Dowries for poor girls, wax and wine to the friars. And in the will, the whole house knows this the way houses know things. In the will, everything. The entire fortune, every florin, every warehouse, the house you are sleeping in, all of it, at his death, to the poor. Not to nephews, not to the church even. He trusts the church with his soul, but not with his money, a very Florentine distinction, but to a fund for the poor of his own city, administered by laymen, audited like a business, charity run on double entry. The richest man of the age has looked at his life's work and concluded that the only way to carry a fortune through the gate of death is to let go of it at the threshold, completely, and have the release notarized. You think about this on the pallet, in the dark, listening to the pen scratch through the wall. Matteo is already whistling through his broken nose. The tiles shuffle overhead in the wind. You are 16 and you own 3 coins and a horn callus, and 1 floor below you a man owns a measurable percentage of the Mediterranean, and of the 2 of you, you are the one who will fall asleep first, easily, like a stone into a well, and he will be awake at the 3rd hour writing to Genoa about alum and to God about mercy, and you drift off wondering, in the last grey moments, which of you is rich. And it isn't as easy a question as the preachers make it, and it isn't as easy a question as the merchants make it either, and the pen scratches and the wind shuffles its cards, and you're gone. And since we are speaking of what a millionaire really is, let me hold the lamp up close, because the distance is where the myths live, and up close he is stranger than any myth. Up close he is a body, and the body is a worry he manages like a branch office. He eats less than his own porters. Bread, a little boiled meat, capers, fennel. He believes in fennel the way other men believe in saints. He drinks his wine watered 3 parts in 4, and lectures anyone within reach, that wine unwatered thickens the blood, and that thickened blood is where the pain in his side lives. The pain in his side is a permanent character in the house, discussed like a difficult relative, and he consults physicians and does not believe them, and consults them again, and buys theriac from the apothecary at a price per ounce that makes Sir Lapo's jaw tighten as he enters it, theriac being a paste of 60 ingredients including viper's flesh, alleged to defend the body against poison and pestilence, and nearly everything else, and the master takes it in a pill at dawn with the grim regularity of a man paying protection money to an extortioner he doubts. He sleeps badly and is proud of it. He is cold always, even in June, and wears a marten-lined cap indoors that is the one soft thing anyone has ever seen touch him. Up close, his clothes are a treatise. Everything he wears is good. You know it is good. Your fingers have priced it across rooms. And nothing he wears is loud, and this is policy, stated policy, delivered to you boys once via Sir Lapo in a single sentence. dress like money at rest, never like money moving. The gorgeous men, the men in figured velvets and scarlet, are either noble, in which case display is their trade, or they're climbing, in which case display is their scaffolding. And scaffolding, says the master, is what you see on a thing that is not finished. His one ornament is a ring, plain gold, which was his father's, which is to say it is 50 years old and survived the summer that killed everyone who could have inherited it before him. And he touches it when he is calculating, thumb to band, around and around, and every clerk in the house reads the ring, touching the way sailors read wind. Up close, he is superstitious in ways that would scandalize the friars if the friars did not do brisk business with him. No contract on the day of the innocents. No voyage begun on a Friday if the house can decently delay it. When the magpies quarrel on the courtyard wall, he notes it. You have seen him note it. And once, when a letter arrived with its seal cracked in transit, cracked by handling, plainly nothing more, he had it read to him standing and was short with everyone until vespers. The age is like this, top to bottom. The same mind that runs double-entry books across 4 currencies keeps a second set of books in older ink, where comets, dreams, and 2-headed calves near Empoli are entered against futures no arithmetic reaches, and no one in this century finds the 2 sets contradictory, and it is not certain they are wrong, and up close, this is the last thing, and the thing that took you longest. He is lonely in a way that has been load-bearing so long, it has become architecture. The great nobles have their bloodlines, the poor have the parish, the crowd, the warm crush of the low quarters. The new-made rich man has partners, correspondents. He has men he has written to twice a week for 30 years, whose sons' marriages he has advised, whose fortunes he has held in his hands and who have held his, and whom he has seen in the flesh, perhaps 4 times in his life. His dearest friend in the world is a notary in Prato to whom he writes letters that are half business and half something, for which the age does not have a word yet, and men will not have a comfortable word for it for centuries. An accounting of the heart, sent by courier, filed by the recipient, both men keeping the correspondence complete on both sides because both men know, they say it to each other, in ink, that the letters are the friendship, that the paper is the place where they actually live. A fortune is a place where many promises cross, so it turns out, is a man. You copy some of those letters, the business halves. Once, tired past midnight, you read 3 lines further than your task required, into the other half, and met the sentence. I have built all this, Ser Lapo mio, and I sleep in it like an innkeeper, and where is the house? And you stopped, and trimmed your candle, and never told anyone, and never forgot it. And neither now will you. In January, Ser Lapo decides you're ready to see the tables. He says it exactly like that. You'll come to the Mercato Nuovo, time you saw the tables, pulling on his cloak, and Matteo's face does a complicated thing, envy dressed as indifference, because the new market is the inner room of the whole world, and junior clerks are not taken there. They are sent past it on errands and told not to loiter. The morning is bright and vicious, a north wind day, the sky scoured blue and the puddles glazed. The Mercato Nuovo is a short walk and a full change of country, a small square in the densest heart of the city, and it is not a market of things. There are no cabbages here, no fish, no wool even. There are benches, tables, long wooden counters set up under the loggias and awnings, each covered with a cloth of green. Green again, the colour of money in this city long before anyone printed money on green paper, the banker's colour. And behind each green cloth sits a man with 3 objects in front of him, a book, a purse, and a set of scales. These are the banchieri, the benchmen. The word bank is being born right here, on this square and squares like it, out of the plain Italian word for the bench the money changer sits on. And around the tables moves a crowd unlike any other crowd in Florence, quieter, better dressed, and vibrating with the tension you can feel on your skin, because nothing in this square weighs more than a pound, and everything in it is worth more than everything you have ever touched. Sir Lapo walks you through it slowly, and for once in his grey life he talks. "Watch the scales," he says, and you watch. A merchant slides gold florins across a green cloth, and the changer does not count them. He weighs them, each one, in a balance so fine it trembles at a breath. Because a florin is a promise of 3.5 grams of gold, and men are men, and coins get clipped, shaved, sweated in bags to shake off dust, and the changer's whole trade, his whole name, rests on catching it. His fingers move like a lace-maker's. He finds one light coin in 30 by touch before the scale confirms it, taps it aside without a word, and the merchant replaces it without a word, and no offence is taken, because the scale is not an accusation. The scale is the truth, and everyone here has agreed to live by it. "Now," Sir Lapo says, steering you to the shade of a pillar, "the letter." And he takes from his breast a small folded paper, one of the house's own, and puts it in your hands. You have copied 100 of these. You have never held one and understood it. A man in Florence owes a man in Bruges 1,000 florins, Sir Lapo says. How does the money travel? You start to answer and he cuts you off with a movement of one ruined finger. It doesn't. That is the answer. It doesn't travel. 1,000 florins in gold is a chest, a mule, an armed escort, 6 weeks over the mountains through country, where every third castle is a toll, and every fourth is a robbery, and the robbery and the toll are sometimes the same castle. No one who can avoid it moves gold. Instead, the finger taps the paper. Our man pays his 1,000 florins here, into this square, to a house that has a partner in Bruges. He receives this, a letter, 4 lines. Pay, at usance, to such a man or his order so many pounds groat. He mails the letter. In Bruges, the creditor presents it, and the Bruges partner pays him there, in Flemish money, out of Flemish takings. Gold has not moved. 2 debts, one here, one there, have eaten each other. The mountain passes are full of paper now, boy, and the paper is faster than the mule, and cannot be melted down, and if it is stolen it is worth nothing to the thief, because it names its man. You turn the little document over. It weighs nothing. It is worth a farm. The wind tugs at it, and your fist closes like a trap. And the rate, Sir Lapo says, lower now, because this is the part that lives next to the sin. The exchange between florins here and groats there. It is never quite even, and it leans always gently in favour of the house that writes the letter. That lean is our bread. Is it usury? He looks at the bright cold sky like a man consulting it. The friars say one thing on Monday and another at a funeral. The lawyers say it is the price of exchange, not the price of time. The master gives to the poor and keeps the lean. And now you know the whole of banking, and it fits in a fist. You are still holding the paper out to him when the noise begins on the far side of the square. It starts as a crowd sound, a thickening, and then a lane opens in the press the way it opens for a fight or an accident, and through it come officials of the mercanzia, the merchants' court, in their livery, and between them a man of maybe 50, bareheaded in January in his shirt, and behind them a notary reading from a paper in the flat carrying voice of official ruin, and you catch the words, "Fallito," fallen, bankrupt. What happens next takes 4 minutes, and you will remember it for 60 years. They bring him to his own bench, a small one, an outer row changer, a man Ser Lapo greets on other mornings, and in front of the whole square, in front of his peers and his creditors and God and everyone, they break it. The green cloth is stripped off. The bench itself, the wooden counter, is turned over and its boards are broken with an iron bar. Methodically, plank by plank, crack, 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 each blow flat and enormous in the sudden quiet. And this is not vandalism. This is law. This is the oldest law of this square. The broken bench, bancarotta. And yes, hold the sound in your mind, bancarotta. Bench broken. That is the word. That is where the word comes from. 700 years from now, your language will still be saying it, bankrupt, and it will mean a form and a filing and a fresh start. And here in the cold sunlight, it means a man standing in his shirt, watching an iron bar destroy his name plank by plank. No one jeers. That is the terrible part. The square watches in a silence like church, because every man behind every green cloth is watching the one fate they all share the mouth of. One bad convoy, one defaulted duke, one partner's son with a gift for dice. The sea is a wolf, the roads are wolves, princes are the biggest wolves of all. Half the great houses of the generation before were pulled down when the King of England simply declined to repay the mountains the Bardi and Peruzzi had lent him. And he was a king, so the debt died and the houses died with it, and the king went on being king. Everyone here descends from that lesson. Everyone here knows the floor is paper. The fallen man is led away to the stench, the debtor's prison, until his creditors are satisfied or exhausted, and the lane in the crowd heals over. And within 100 heartbeats the square is trading again, scales trembling, quills scratching, because it must, because the convoy sails in the spring regardless, and Sir Lapo takes the bill of exchange back out of your hand, folds it away, and says the only sentence of the day he did not plan. Enter everything, hide nothing. A blot confessed is ink. A blot concealed is that. A slight movement of the grey head toward the splinters, and your stomach drops out of the world. Because he knows. Of course he knows. The Southampton letter, the scraped patch, the 6 hours of candle. He holds every sheet against the window light. He has always held every sheet against the window light. He has known since the morning after, and he has said nothing for a month, and he is saying it now, here, with the wreckage of a man's life still lying in the square for punctuation. And he is not going to dismiss you, and he is never going to mention it again. And this, the cold, the paper, the splinters, the mercy with a blade folded inside it, this is your education. This is the whole forge in one morning, and you walk back to the house beside him in silence, and you stand very straight, and you have never in your life listened harder to anything than you're listening now to nothing at all. February teaches you what the winter sea does to a house of paper. It begins with the rider. Mid-afternoon, a Tuesday, sleet coming down in grey ropes, and a man on a blown horse at the door, mud to the thigh, carrying the pouch of the Scarsella, the merchant's courier service, the private post that the trading companies of Florence run jointly over the Alps and along the coasts, riders in relay, because news is the one commodity dearer than saffron. A letter's age is part of its value. The house pays the courier by speed, and this courier has been paid for speed. Genoa to Florence in 2 days over winter roads, and the pouch he hands in has sea salt dried white on the leather. You're the one who carries it up. The master opens it standing. You watch his face while he reads, which you should not do, and his face does nothing at all, which is how you know. A storm has come down the Gulf of Lions. The master mariners call that stretch the wolf's mouth of the whole western sea, where the wind falls off the mountains of Provence like something dropped rather than blown, and it has scattered the winter sailing. 2 ships known driven ashore near Hyères, others unaccounted, and among the unaccounted the galley of Bartolomeo Vitale, out of Barcelona for Porto Pisano, carrying among much else the house's saffron, the house's Spanish wool, and 40 bales of the house's woad. You know the cargo because you entered the cargo. You can see the page. You can see your own handwriting on the page. The master folds the letter once and says to Sir Lapo, in the voice he uses for ordering dinner, "The insurance book." And here is where you learn the last great invention of this world, the one that makes all the others survivable. Marine insurance is barely older than the master himself. His generation built it contract by contract right here and in Genoa and in Pisa, for a premium, 7% this voyage, winter rate, war rate. Other merchants, syndicates of them, 5 names, 10 names on a single policy, have promised to make the cargo good if the sea takes it. Risk sliced thin and passed around a city until no one man holds enough of it to die of it. The house insures its own goods with others, and underwrites others' goods in turn, and the premiums are entered in their own white leather book, and the whole arrangement is another of those lawyer-blessed structures that lives one alley over from the sin of selling time. You may not sell time, but it seems you may sell fear, and no one looks too hard down that alley, because without this no one would dare load a winter galley at all, and the cities would starve in the dark like everyone's grandfathers did. So the house will not be ruined. That is what the insurance book says. If the Vital galley's on the bottom, the syndicates pay, and the loss becomes their loss, spread across 20 fortunes in slivers. But the sea does not only take goods, and this is the part the premiums cannot reach, and this is why the house does not sleep that week. There are men on that galley, 140 rowers and sailors and a scrivener and a master, and the scrivener, the ship's clerk, who keeps the cargo book, the floating twin of your own ledgers. The scrivener of the Vitali galley is a Prato man, Nofri, 22 years old, who sat where you sit, who slept in your attic 5 years ago, whose handwriting you have handled neater stitching in the files. Monna Tessa fed him at the long table for 3 years. Ser Lapo trained his hand. The master stood godfather to his sister's child. The paper fortune is insured. The people are not. There is no policy written anywhere in Christendom on Nofri. That week the house runs on its rails. Shutters, bells, bread, ink. And underneath the rails, everyone waits. You catch Monna Tessa standing in the larder doorway with her hands stopped in her apron, looking at nothing. Ser Lapo's inspections get quieter and more terrible. The master's pen scratches later into the night, and twice you hear, through the wall, the pen stop, and the silence where it stops is worse than any sound the house makes. On Friday he has a mass said at the Carmine for those at sea. It is entered in the alms book. Everything is entered. That is what this house does. Instead of weeping, it enters things. You find you cannot stop doing the arithmetic that has no numbers in it. A galley in a gulf. Wind falling off mountains. You have never seen the sea. You have never seen anything bigger than the Arno in flood. and you lie on the pallet at night trying to build the Mediterranean in your head, out of the Arno multiplied, and you cannot. And somewhere on that unimaginable water is a boy who used to skip the 14th stair, and your own calloused writing claw curls against your chest under the blanket, and you understand, in the marrow, for the first time, the price at the bottom of every entry you have ever made. Wool does not move itself. Somebody rose. The second courier comes 11 days later at dusk on a Thursday, and this time the whole house hears the horse. You are all in the courtyard before the pouch is out of his satchel. Clerks, porters, Monna Tessa with flour on her arms to the elbow. And the master comes down the stairs at a pace you have never seen him use, and takes the letter, and cracks the green seal of the Pisa branch with his thumb and reads. And his shoulders, this is what you will remember, not words. His shoulders, which you had never noticed were raised, come down. The Vitale galley is at Porto Pisano, dismasted, half-swamped, 8 days overdue, towed the last miles by fishermen from Livorno who will be demanding and receiving and deserving a salvage payment that Sir Lapo will grumble about entering for a week. 3 men lost overboard in the Gulf. God keep them, names to follow. The cargo wet but mostly whole. The saffron packed in oiled skins inside barrels because saffron is packed like relics, entirely safe. And the scrivener Nofri, writes the Pisa manager, in a line the master reads aloud to the courtyard in a voice with one crack in it that he does not bother to hide. The scrivener Nofri kept the cargo book dry inside his shirt through the whole of it, and presented it to me on the quay, and asked that his mother be told before anyone tells her otherwise. The courtyard makes a sound, not a cheer, something lower and older than a cheer, a collective loosening, half of it prayer. Monna Tessa turns and goes back into her kitchen very fast, and that night the household eats meat that is not a feast day ration, and no one comments. And the master sends wine down the long table, actual unwatered wine, and Matteo gets loud, and Giovanni smiles his tomb effigy smile, and you drink your cup slowly, and through the wall, later, the pen scratches on toward matins, because Genoa must be told, and Barcelona, and the insurers, and the salvage negotiated, and the 3 drowned men's wages paid to their widows, which the house will pay in full to the day of death, though no law requires it, and which will be entered, like everything, like grief itself in this place, in the book, in the columns, in the name of God and of prophet. You fall asleep to the scratching. Somewhere south and west, on a wet quay in the dark, a dismasted galley lies against the stones like a run-horse, and a boy your senior by 6 years is sleeping in a harbour inn with a ledger's shape still printed on his chest. That could be you. The thought arrives without permission and stands there in the dark. It doesn't frighten you the way it should. In March, a rich man dies, and Florence shows you what money is for. His name is Messavieri, a banker of the old sort, 71, dead in his bed of nothing worse than 71. And the news is around the city before his body is cold, moving at Scarcella speed, mouth to mouth, 'cause a great man's death is business news. Debts fall due, partnerships dissolve, 100 contracts wake up and start asking questions. In the scrittoio, Ser Lapo has 3 of the dead man's obligations pulled from the files before the bells have finished tolling, and the master reads them standing at the window and says half to himself, "Paid, paid, and the heirs will honour the 3rd, or I will know why." And then, in a different voice, older, "He lent me 200 florins in the year of the flood, when I was nobody, on my face alone." A pause. "Green wax and a black cloak, Lapo. the whole house walks. And so, 2 days later, you learn that a medieval millionaire's funeral is not a burial. It is a statement of account, published in the street, itemized in wax and cloth and noise. The house walks, the master and Monna Margherita, Ser Lapo, the clerks, the porters, everyone in dark cloth hastily furnished from the warehouse, because attendance is currency, and the size of a man's following is read and counted by every eye in the city. And you join a procession already half the length of a street, and the procession is built deliberately out of expense. First the wax, torches and candles, hundreds of them, carried by mourners and set thick as a forest around the bier, and you have to understand what wax is in this world. Beeswax is precious, wax is imported, wax is entered in ledgers by the pound, and to burn it by the hundredweight in broad daylight is to burn money in public, visibly, on purpose, the way a lord might scatter coins. Except lords scatter silver, and Florence burns wax, because Florence thinks in commodities even at the grave. The smell of it fills the street, honey and hot fat and smoke, laid over the incense, laid over the crowd smell, and the light of all those flames in the grey March morning is soft and enormous and utterly unnecessary, which is the entire point. Then the cloth. The bier is covered in crimson, and your eye, your 7 months trained wool-handling eye, prices it before your piety can stop you. That is San Martino grade. Kermes dyed, the Kermes carried from Spain. 80 florins the bolt if it is a soldo, and there are bolts of it, and it will be given to the friars afterward, and the friars will sell it back into the trade, and somewhere a clerk like you will enter it. Behind the bier walk the paid mourners and the guild brothers and the priests, dozens of priests from every church the dead man endowed, and he endowed strategically the way he lent, and then family, and then the great men of the city in order of a precedence that everyone denies caring about and everyone can recite asleep, and then the long tail of houses like yours, hundreds of walkers, a river of black wool moving through streets where all trade has stopped, all of it. You cannot stop seeing this standing on your toes at the edge of the piazza while the bier goes up the steps of Santa Croce. All of it is the Mercato Nuovo by other means. The wax is a balance published. The crimson is a credit rating. The priests are insurance. Of the other kind, premiums paid across 40 years on the only voyage with no salvage. Half the city has turned out to read the statement, and the statement reads, "This house is sound, the heirs are sound, the debts will be honoured, do not call in your loans. A funeral this size can hold a bank together, a thin funeral can start a run." Men have been ruined by dying modestly. Inside the church, you squeeze in among the last, into the cold stone shadow and the candle blaze. The friar who preaches is famous, and he earns his fee, and he does the thing the great preachers of this age do to merchant congregations, which is beat them like carpets. He stands over the crimson bier and the wax fortune burning around it, and he preaches on the camel and the needle's eye, on the rich man and Lazarus, on the purse hanging around the damned neck. And the assembled wealth of Florence stands in its black wool and takes it, heads down, like hail, like medicine, like men who have paid precisely for this beating, and will be alarmed to receive less. You watch the master's face by candlelight, side on, 2 rows ahead. It is perfectly still, but his lips are moving with the psalm responses a half beat ahead of the priest's, the way a man says words he's been saying for 60 years, and it comes to you watching him that this is the 1 square in the city where he believes every rate posted. and that he has already reckoned his own account against it, and made his arrangement, the will, the poor, the release at the threshold, the coldest and most audited act of love this city has ever notarized. Coming out, the crowd loosens into the piazza and becomes Florence again in about 40 steps. 2 heirs of the dead man are already standing apart with their notary, heads together. A wine cellar has set up at the church corner and is doing the business of his year, and Matteo beside you is calculating the wax out loud until Ser Lapo's look shuts him off like a snuffer. And then the small thing happens, the thing the day was apparently arranged around, though no one arranged it. An old woman is begging on the church steps. There are always beggars at a rich funeral. A rich funeral is the beggar's harvest. Everyone gives at a funeral. Giving at a funeral is part of the statement. And the crowd is dropping coins into a dozen palms. But this woman isn't begging exactly. She's sitting against the base of the doorway with her hands in her lap, not lifted, and she's wearing, over her rags, a cloak. And the cloak is good. It is old and worn to the weft, and 30 years out of fashion. But your fingers know across 10 feet of March air what your eyes confirm. That was fine cloth once, the finest. That was somebody's crimson before the sun, and the years unbuilt the dye thread by thread to this ghost of rust. The master stops in front of her. The whole house halts behind him like a barge train. He does not give her a coin. He stands looking at the cloak for the space of 3 breaths, and then he asks her name, and she gives it. And it is a name. Even you have heard it. It is a name from the story every apprentice is told, one of the companies that fell with the English king's debts before your father was born, a name that used to sit over one of the biggest tables in the New Market. And the master nods slowly, the way he nods at a trial balance that has closed, and he says, "Not to her, not to anyone," in the voice like gravel turning. "Her grandfather's paper moved kingdoms. Look where paper goes." Then he gives, you see the flash of it, gold, an actual florin into the still hands that never lifted. And he walks on, and the house walks after him through the thinning wax smoke, and nobody says one word all the way home, and you enter the florin yourself the next morning in the alms book, under her family's name, written out in full in your best hand, because Ser Lapo stands over you until you have written it in your best hand, and that page, that entry, that name, of everything you will copy in 5 years in this house, that is the one your hand still remembers the shape of when you are old. April opens the city like a fist unclenching, and on an errand morning between Easter and May Day, you get 1 hour that belongs to no ledger, and it is the hour that teaches you what all the money is standing on. The Mercato Vecchio, the old market, the food market, the new market trades in gold, and the old market trades in everything gold is for. And in April it is a roar you can steer by from 3 streets off. You come into it along the Poulterer's side, and the first thing is the noise of the birds, hundreds of them, capons and pullets and doves in wicker crates stacked head high, a rustling, complaining, feather-smelling wall, and then the fish tables, Arno eels alive in tubs thick as your wrist, moving in that slow muscular way that makes the skin on your arm stand up, and salted fish from the coast in barrels breathing their sharp grey reek, and then the herb women, and the herb women are the perfume of the whole square. Bundles of new mint and parsley and borage on wet cloth, and you pass through their smell like passing through a hedge into a different country. The cheesemongers' stalls, wheels of pecorino stacked like pale masonry, the seller shaving a sliver onto your palm from the wheel you cannot afford, so that you will remember the stall when you can, and that sliver, sheep sweet and crystalline and salt, sits in your mouth like an argument that the world is, on balance, defensible. Everything is counted, weighed, shouted, sworn about. Two women are conducting a dispute over the price of eggs, with a rhetorical command that the priors of the city could study. A boy your age steers a hand barrow of new artichokes through the crush by pure voice alone. Coming through, Madonna mind the feet, in a chant he doesn't know he is singing. And rising over the whole roaring pan of it, from the steps of the little church in the square's corner, a voice, a preacher, a Franciscan, young, hoarse, in the grey habit worn to the colour of street, doing what the friars do in market squares in this century, which is compete with the egg women, the barrow boys, the whole shouting economy, for the ears of the crowd, on the crowd's own ground, at the crowd's own volume. And this morning his text is money, and you stop at the edge of the eddy of listeners because you are 17, and formed now, and cannot walk past your own trade being weighed. He is good. He works like a man selling because he is one. He holds up an imaginary florin between finger and thumb so vividly that 100 people look at the empty air, and he asks it questions. Where were you born, little yellow lord? Who digs you, who mints you, who dies for you? He walks the coin through the city, through the wool sheds, the dye vats, the counting houses, naming no names and describing with a terrible cheerful accuracy half the houses whose letters you file, and the crowd laughs where he wants and goes quiet where he wants, and then he does the turn, the old turn, the one the whole century's preaching runs on. And on the last day, brothers, when the books are opened, and they will be opened, the true books, the ones kept in a hand no clerk can counterfeit, what will be entered under your name? The interest you took or the mercy, the bench you kept or the beggar you passed. You cannot carry it through the gate. You have seen them carry to Santa Croce under crimson. Did any of them sit up and take the cloth along? Ordinary market business continues around the sermon's edges the whole time. That is the thing to see. An egg changes hands 4 feet from damnation, and both parties count the change. Because Florence holds these two truths at once, all day, every day, without strain. That money is the water everyone swims in, and that everyone swimming will one day be pulled out of the water and asked what they did in it. The friar knows his crowd is going straight back to the stalls. The crowd knows the friar's convent eats bread bought with wool money. Nobody in the square considers any of this hypocrisy. It is more like a man and his conscience keeping 2 shops on the same street and trading with each other, daily, at rates set by long negotiation. You put your Saturday coin, unspent, into the friar's bowl on your way out of the square. You could not tell anyone exactly why. Partly the sliver of pecorino, partly the master's ring going around and around, partly the scraped patch on a letter 2 winters old now, that no one but you and one grey man remembers. Sir Lapo, when you return, looks at you a moment longer than the errand's report requires, the ajar trap silence, learned from the source. But all he says is, "The Empley boy blotted the household book while you were gadding. Show him the knife, gently." And you take the penknife and sit down beside a frightened 11-year-old at a sloped desk and breathe on your fingers out of pure habit though the morning is warm and say, "Watch, slowly, like this. A blot confessed is ink," and begin to scrape and the small dry mouse-in-the-wall sound fills the scrittoio, and the wheel of the house turns through you and onward the way it was always going to. Spring comes up the Arno Valley like a rumour, and then the other rumour comes with it. First the good weeks. The light changes. The mud dries to a fine biscuit-coloured dust. The tenterfields outside the walls fill with drying cloth like a fleet under sail, and the house accelerates, because spring is the trading season waking, the galleys fitting out at Porto Pisano, the mule trains forming for the mountain passes, the whole paper world stretching after winter. You are given more. That is how promotion happens here. No ceremony, just wait, quietly added, the way you load a mule you trust. You keep the household book alone now. You draft routine letters for Ser Lapo's correction, and the corrections are getting fewer, and one morning there are none. And he passes the letter back without a word, and that no word is a diploma. Your hands have changed in a year. You notice it one evening, washing them at the well. The callus-like horn, the ink that no longer fully leaves the right forefinger, a new hardness across the palm from hefting sample bales in the warehouse, where Ser Lapo now sends you to check deliveries because he announced this to the warehouse foreman in your presence, flatly, as a fact of nature. The boy's hands no wool. Your mother would look at these hands and laugh and cry. They are a clerk's hands. They are worth, on the open market of this city, food, lodging, and a future. They are the first property you have ever owned. Then, in May, the other rumour. It comes the way it always comes, the way the old people say it came 50 years ago. From the coast, from the ports, ahead of any official word, travelling in the mouths of muleteers and boatmen. Sickness in Genoa. Then sickness in Pisa. Then a Wednesday when the fry shop man, handing you your chickpea fritter, you buy one a week now. Ser Lapo slips the clerks a small coin on Saturdays from some fund that appears in no book you keep. The fry shop man says, without being asked, in the too casual voice of a man handling a hot thing, that his wife's brother carts fish up from Livorno, and the fish has stopped coming, and the gates at Pisa are turning strangers away. You know the word before anyone says the word. Everyone in this city knows the word before anyone says it. It is the word under the whole century. La Moria, the dying. Understand what that word is in Florence in 1398. It is not history. The great pestilence of 1348. The one that took half this city. The one that orphaned the master. The one your grandmother survived as a girl and would never speak of except to cross herself. That was 50 years ago, but it did not leave. It comes back. It has come back, wave after smaller wave, every 10 or 15 years, the way a tide comes back, in 63, in 74, in 83, each time taking its tithe, mostly of children, mostly of the poor, and every soul above the age of 5 in this city has personally buried someone the tide took. The city lives between waves the way coast people live between storms, fully, loudly, and with one ear always turned toward the sea. And the house of Francesco Di Marco has a standing plan for this, the way it has a plan for fire and a plan for war, because the master is a man who was made, at 13, in a single summer by the thing, and has spent 49 years expecting it back. You have seen the plan. You have copied the plan. It is a list in Ser Lapo's hand, updated yearly, titled with no drama whatsoever, Ordini in caso di moria, orders in case of the dying, which books go into which chests go on which mules, which factor stays to mind the warehouse, at doubled wages, doubled again if God forbid. the route to Bologna, the house in Bologna, the letters to be sent, the credit to be arranged ahead, the wax, the wine, the flour. Because here is the truth about millionaires and the plague, and it is the plainest social fact of the age, and the age knows it and says it out loud. The rich run. That is the medicine. There is no other medicine. The physicians have theories about corrupted air, and the doctors of the body can offer you vinegar, prayer, and distance, and only distance works. Flight's the cure, and flight costs money, and so survival itself, the rawest good there is priced like everything else. The poor stay, because the poor are their labour, and their labour is here. The carders and the dyers and the fry shop man will shut their doors and burn rosemary and take their chances in the crowded parishes, and the great houses will fold their paper worlds onto muleback and ride out through gates the poor cannot afford to pass beyond, to villas in clean air, and everyone knows this is how it goes, and the preachers name it bitterly from the pulpits every wave, and every wave it goes this way again. You discover that you do not know which you are. That is the thing that keeps you awake now, on the pallet, in the warming nights, listening to the tiles. You're not family. You're not a hired labourer either. You're a clerk, an in-between thing, the house's property and the house's investment, and the list in Ser Lapo's hand says which books go to Bologna, but you have never seen the line that says which boys do. Matteo has seen it too. Matteo, who knows everything an hour early, whose sources are the kitchen and the stable and a genius for lingering. And Matteo cannot find out either. And for the first time since you met him, Matteo being unable to find something out frightens you more than the thing itself. The city begins to change around you in small ways first. Fewer strangers at the inns, lime being slaked in the courtyards of the rich. The smell of it, that harsh mineral bite drifting over walls, because lime is what you buy when you're thinking about the thing no one is saying. At the Mercato Nuovo, the tables trade thinner. Men stand a half step further apart than they stood in April, and no one has decided to do this, and everyone is doing it. The price of country property, Ser Lapo notes dryly, entering a correspondent's letter, has risen. The price of things is the city thinking out loud. You are learning to read the city the way you read a ledger, and the ledger of Florence in early June says, in 100 small entries, in rising rents and thinning markets and lime and distance, it is coming up the road. And then, on the eve of San Giovanni, midsummer, the city's own feast, the one day Florence loves itself completely, banners on the towers, the whole town in the streets, word arrives that is not rumour. It comes on scarsella leather, sealed from the Pisa branch, and you carry it up yourself, and this time you do not watch the master's face, you watch his hands, and his hands are still, and that is worse. Cases inside the walls of Pisa. The branch manager has closed the office, sent the boys to the hills, and writes, "You will file this letter, you will know it by heart." Writes, "It is the same as always, Messere. It begins among the poor by the water, and the officials deny it for the sake of the fair, and the burying confounds the denying. Do not wait for Florence to admit what Florence will not admit. You taught me that. I return the lesson with my duty and my love. The master stands at the window with a letter for a long time. Below, in the street, they are hanging garlands for the feast. Lapo, he says at last, the orders. What happens next you will describe, years from now, to your own apprentices, as the most impressive thing you ever saw money do. Not the funeral, not the galleys. This. a fortune folding itself up in 30 hours. The orders come down at dusk and the house does not panic because the house has rehearsed. That is the thing nobody tells you about the very rich. They rehearse. Twice in your year here on quiet Sundays, Sir Lapo has run what he called an inventory exercise. Chess carried to the courtyard and back, and you all grumbled through it. And now you watch the same movements happen at speed, in earnest, in lamplight, and you understand you were being drilled the way soldiers are drilled, so that fear, when it came, would find every hand already knowing its work. The books go first. Of course the books go first. The white leather ledgers, the letter files, the insurance book, the secret book. There is a secret book. Every house has a secret book. The libro segreto, partners' shares and true balances, kept in the master's own hand, and you see it for the first and only time that night, a small fat volume in a plain cover, passing from the strong box to a chest lined in oiled cloth, and the master locks that chest himself and keeps the key on the cord around his own neck, next to the cross. Paper, then wax, then coin. The plate and Monna Margarita's jewels go into a strong box that 2 porters can barely lift, and the strong box goes not onto the mules but down into the cellar, into a dry pit under the flagstones that you did not know existed. Because coin is heavy and travels badly, and robbers on a refugee road can smell silver through oak. But paper is light. Paper is the fortune. The fortune will ride. The warehouse cannot ride. 200 bales of wool cannot ride. And this is the other lesson of the night. Watching the master walk the warehouse aisles at midnight with a lamp, pricing what must be left to fate. He touches the bales as he passes, flat-palmed, the way you would touch the flank of a horse you were leaving. The foreman, Nanny, stays, volunteers to stay before he can be asked. A widower with no children, and he says an old quarrel with death that he'd as soon settle on his own doorstep. At triple wages, with a second key and written authority and a barrel of vinegar and instructions that are pure Francesco Di Marco. Admit no one, air nothing, buy nothing, and write to me every 3rd day, even if the letter says only that you live, especially if it says only that. And in the small hours in the courtyard, between the standing mules with their loads being roped down, that sound, hemp creaking over canvas, hooves shifting on stone, a lantern hissing, the master answers the question you've not dared ask by not treating it as a question at all. Ser Lapo reads the travel list aloud by lantern, the family, the books, chest by chest, the 2 maids, the cook, 4 porters, and then the clerks Giovanni, Matteo, Niccolò. That's all. 3 names in a list between the cook and the flour. You are cargo, and you have never in your life been so glad to be cargo, and the gladness lost one full breath before it curdles, because behind you in the dark, holding a mule's headstall, is the stable boy, Chili, who is 12, whose name was not read, who is city hired and city paid and belongs to the city, and who heard the list the same as you did, and is looking at nothing with a face that has already understood everything, the way the children of the poor understand everything early. And the master passing stops. You see this. You are 3 feet away. You will testify to this on your deathbed. Stops. Looks at the boy 1 second, 2. The ajar trap silence. And then says to Sir Lapo in the dinner-ordering voice, write to his mother in the morning. He rides with the flour. He can mind mules in Bologna as well as here. Enter his wage the same. And walks on to check a girth strap. Because a kindness dwelt upon is a debt collected, and this man does not collect from the poor. You leave at first light on the feast of San Giovanni itself, which is either sacrilege or perfect Florentine sense depending on which friar you ask. Out through streets already strange. Half the great doors you pass are shut and blind. Other houses running their own drills. Other mule trains forming in other courtyards. The exodus of paper. And at the gate, the Porta San Gallo. You see the thing you will not be able to unsee. The thing that is the whole answer to the question this story asked at the beginning. What were millionaires really like? And the answer is a gate. Because at the gate, going out, the road is money. Mule trains, carriages, mounted households, the liveries of the banking families, a river of the well-shod flowing north toward Bologna and the clean hills. And beside the gate, not going anywhere, is the city, the porters, the carders with their double cough, the fry shop man's people, the women with children on their hips standing in the feast day morning watching the wealth of Florence ride out of the plague like watching weather leave. Nobody shouts. That is the terrible part, again always. A few call out, actual farewells some of them, to masters they serve, God keep you, Messere, and mean it. And one voice, just one, young, from somewhere in the crowd shade under the gate arch, calls the other thing, the true thing, flat and clear. Send us your prayers from the mountains, lords. We'll mind your city for you. And no one answers because there is no answer. And the mules walk, and the walls fall away behind you, and the dust of the north road comes up warm and biscuit-coloured around the hooves, and you ride into the hills with a fortune in paper creaking on mule back around you, 16 years old, alive, chosen, ashamed, grateful, watching the towers of Florence sink into the heat shimmer like a fleet going down, and beside you, Sheely the stable boy rides the flour mule with his fists white in its mane, and neither of you says one word for 11 miles. Bologna is a city of arcades, and you spend a summer of dread under them, and dread, you learn, is mostly clerical work. Because the fortune does not pause. That is the discovery of the exile. The paper world sets up in 3 rented rooms off the Strada Maggiore and simply resumes mid-sentence. By the second morning the desks are arranged, the inkhorns filled, the ledgers open to the pages they were closed on, and the Scarcella riders find the new address the way water finds a level, and the letters flow. Genoa, Avignon, Barcelona, prices and cargoes and disputes. The Mediterranean entirely indifferent to whether the hand entering it trembles. Alum does not care. Woad does not care. You copy and enter and balance in a strange city while the thing happens to your city, and there is a mercy in the columns you would never have predicted. For the hours your mind is inside the arithmetic, it is nowhere else. The letters from Florence come every 3rd day, as ordered. Nanny the foreman writes them on warehouse scrap in a hand like fence posts, and Serlapo reads them aloud to the room, every word, even the greetings, because the master ordered that too. The house will hear its own news together, standing like a family at grace. The letters are the summer. You will remember that summer as a man's handwriting. I live. The wool is dry. They are burying at San Frediano, and by the Porta al Prato, the low parishes, by the water, as the Pisan said. The Signoria has hired the Becchini and doubled their wage, and they are worth neither. A man came to the door saying he was from the Office of Health, and I did not know his face and did not open, as ordered. I live. I live. It is among the dyers now. The vats at the Corso stand cold, which I have not seen in 30 years, and the river runs clean, which no one alive has seen, and no one can look at it, the clean water being worse than any dirty. Your fry cook is closed. The little bells go all day. Not the great bells. The Signoria has forbidden the great bells for the sake of the spirits of the well, so the churches ring the small bells only, and the small bells all day are worse. I live. I live. Chailey's mother and the 2 young ones are gone out to her people at Signa, walking, before the roads closed, and I gave her from the small chest 3 florins against your order to buy nothing. And if that is theft, Messeri, come and hang me in the autumn. I will be here, or I will be past hanging. The wool is dry. The master has that letter read twice. Then he says, enter the 3 florins as paid by my instruction, and goes up to write, and Sir Lapo enters it, and his ruined hand, you notice, presses harder than the entry needs. You do your own accounting that summer, at night, under a Bolognese arcade ceiling instead of rattling tiles. The count of what you are. A year ago you owned 3 coins and a blanket. Now, the callus, the hand, the eye for wool, the double entry living in you like a second grammar, the trust of terrible old men, and this new thing, the heaviest item, entered nowhere. The knowledge of what your safety costs, and who is paying it in the low parishes by the water. The preachers say wealth is a camel at a needle. The master says wealth is a wall against the wolf. You have seen the wall now from both sides, from the road and from the gate, and you are inside it, and you did not build it, and you will spend the rest of your life deciding what a man owes for shelter he was carried into. Some nights the arithmetic balances. Most nights you fall asleep before it does, because you're 16, and you have worked 14 hours, and the body forecloses on the soul at a certain hour. And that too, Sir Lapo would say, is a mercy with a blade folded in it. The wave crests in August and breaks in September, the way the waves do, the tide going out with the heat. The letters begin to say fewer bells. Then, the vats at the Corso are fired again. I smelled woad on the east wind and wept like a girl, Messere, and am not ashamed. Then, in October, the letter that says the Office of Health has opened the gates to returners, and the master reads it, and looks around the rented room at his folded-up fortune, and says one word, the best word, home. The road back is the road out, reversed and rinsed. Rain has laid the dust. The mule train winds down out of the hills, and the towers of Florence come up out of the valley one by one, and the city that swallowed you whole a year and a half ago now reads to you like a page. You know its parishes by their bell voices before you can see them. You know from a mile off by the smoke which quarters have their fires lit and which stand cold, and you find you are counting the cold ones, and stopping yourself, and counting again. The house, when the doors open, smells of vinegar and lime, and underneath it, faithful as a heartbeat of wool. Nanny stands in the courtyard thinner by a belt notch, and the master crosses the stones and takes him by both arms, and holds him there, and says nothing at all for longer than you have ever seen the man spend on anything that could not be entered, and then says, the wool is dry, and Nanny says, the wool is dry, Messere, and that is the whole reunion, and it is the most any 2 Tuscan men of their generation have ever said to each other, and every person in the courtyard understands it perfectly, and Monna Tessa is in her kitchen with the door shut, banging pans, crying into the soup where it's nobody's business. Florence has lost. The numbers move through the counting houses before they move anywhere else, because deaths are contracts too. Some thousands, fewer than 83, far fewer than the great dying. The waves shrink, the old men say, as if the thing were spending down a principle. The fry shop reopens under the dead man's brother, same oil, same batter, and you stand at the counter with your Saturday coin, and cannot eat the first fritter for a full minute, and the brother watches you not eat it, and says, not unkindly, in the voice of a man who has said it 40 times this month, he'd sooner you ate it hot, boy. Everything he made to be eaten hot, and the city closes over its dead like water, because it must, because the convoy sails in the spring regardless, and the paper world spins on, and the small bells fall silent one parish at a time, and by Advent the great bells are back, and the first time the whole city rings together again for a feast, every soul in the street stops walking for a moment. You see it. A whole street of Florentines standing still in the cold, with their faces slightly lifted, like fields under rain, and then walks on, and no one speaks of it. And this, too, is what the age is. A people that has learned to be flooded and to drain, and to keep its books through both. In the new year, on a hard, bright January morning, almost exactly a year after the Mercato Nuovo and the broken bench, the master takes you up the Campanile. It is not explained. Nothing he does is explained. He appears at your desk mid-morning in his outdoor cloak and says, "Leave that. Walk with me," and the scrittoio holds its breath, and Serlapo does not look up, which means Serlapo knew. You walk beside him through the streets, and walking beside him is its own education, watching the city handle him, the bows exactly calibrated to his credit. The sellers who straighten, the one great man in furs who gives him precisely half a nod and receives precisely half a nod back. 2 fortunes passing like ships, to the cathedral works, where the master of the works himself comes out to greet him, because the house has money in the fabric fund being to Florence what a pew is to smaller towns, and then the stairs, Giotto's tower, the Campanile, marble outside like a reliquary, and inside a plain stone gullet of steps winding up and up in cold twilight, 400 of them and more, and the master climbs them at 63 like a man paying an instalment on something, steadily, one hand on the newel, breathing hard and refusing to breathe harder, and you climb behind him with your 16-year-old lungs, ashamed of their ease, and the slit windows strode past, a slice of roofs, a slice of hills, roofs, hills, and the wind begins to find its voice in the shaft, and then the last turn, and the light comes down like a shout, and you step out onto the top of the world. Florence, whole at one glance. You grip the parapet. Everyone grips the parapet the first time. The drop underneath you is the height of everything you've ever stood on stacked. The wind up here is a river with no banks, cold and clean and smelling of nothing at all, which after a year and a half in the city's smells is itself a kind of vertigo. And below and around, filling the bowl of its valley to the walls like bread proofing in a pan, the city. The roofs run red-brown to every horizon of themselves, a tide of tile broken by towers, the old family towers cropped short by law centuries ago, the stumps of a more murderous age, and by the churches riding the tide like ships, Santa Croce east, Santa Maria Novella west, the Badia's spire, San Lorenzo, the Carmine across the water. The Arno lies through the middle of it all in a curve of hammered pewter, crossed by its 4 bridges with their freight of little shops, and along its banks you can see, even from here, especially from here, the industry. The dye sheds steaming, the tenter frames in the fields beyond the walls with their bolts of cloth stretched drying, red and blue and saints purple, laid out on the winter grass like the flags of a nation that has no king, only customers. And directly below, so close it tilts the stomach, the cathedral's unfinished east end, the great drum, the hole in the sky, with the work scaffolding webbed around it, and men the size of ink drops moving on the ledges, still laying courses toward a dome nobody knows how to build, on schedule, on faith, on funds. The master lets you look. He waits, in fact, watching not the city but you looking at the city, with the pale unresting eyes at rest for once. And when he finally speaks, the wind takes half his voice, and you have to lean in. Count the smokes, he says. You count. You cannot count. Thousands of hearth smokes rising and shredding, one for every fire in Florence. Every smoke is a pot, he says. Every pot wants filling twice a day. Grain from Sicily, because the countryside cannot feed this. Salt from the coast. Fish. Oil. Wine. Every fill-in is a purchase. Every purchase a price. Every price a message running down a wire of men from that rooftop to a field or a sea some hundreds of leagues off. Now the cloth. The blunt hand moves toward the Tenterfields. English fleece, Picard woad, Spanish kermes, alum out of Asia. Combed here, spun in the villages, woven here, dyed here, sold in Alexandria and Bruges and Paris. There is not one thing you can see from this tower, boy, not one stone or smoke or thread that stands by itself. The whole of it hangs in a net, and the net is knotted out of promises, and the promises are kept, when they are kept. Because men wrote them down, and other men can read what was written. That is all a fortune is. It is a place where many promises cross. He is quiet a moment. The wind hunts around the parapet. They preached at Messer Vieri's box that a rich man is a camel at a needle. And they are right, and I have made my arrangements accordingly, and God will audit them. But hear the other half, which the friars do not preach, because the friars eat bread they did not have to ship. The half nod downward at the whole city. 50 years ago the dying took one soul in two out of that bowl, one in two, and the net held, torn, knotted with worse string, but it held. The grain kept coming, the letters kept moving, the books kept balancing, and the city filled again, and built that. The drum, the scaffolds, the ink-drop men. With the wool money of orphans, not because merchants are good men. I have known merchants 60 years. We are not good men. We are careful men. But a careful man's promises outlive him, and a net of kept promises will carry more souls across a bad century than all the swords in Christendom. That is what the money is, when it is anything. Now you know my whole trade, and it fits in a fist, and it is time you knew the rest. And there, on the top of the tower, with Florence smoking below and the wind taking every third word, he tells you that Ser Lapo is old, and Giovanni goes to Pisa at Easter to be trained under the branch manager, and that the Avignon house needs a second clerk with a fair hand and an eye for wool, and that he has written your name to Avignon if you will go. Avignon, the papal city, the far side of the mountains, the world. And you hear yourself say yes before the word has consulted you, and he nods once. The trial balance nod, closed, agreed, entered, and turns to start the 400 steps down, and pauses at the stairhead with his hand on the cold stone, and says the last thing, not turning around, so that you receive it as you will receive it for the rest of your life, as a voice over a shoulder on a high place. The Mugello sends down chestnuts and clerks. The chestnuts are more certain. Prove me wrong. The seasons turn once more while your papers are drawn. You keep your books and train your replacement. A new boy in the attic, 11 years old, from Empoli, who flinches at the house bell and cries in the dark the first week quietly, the way you did and swore you didn't. And you tell him across the dark it gets easier, and hear how the words have changed owners, and understand that this is how the house reproduces itself, voice to voice in attic dark, generation after generation of boys handing down the one sentence that is always a lie the night it is said and always true by spring. Winter cracks your knuckles one more time, Lent thins the soup, and on a morning in April, with the roads dry and the convoy season opening, you stand in the courtyard where you once ruined and rescued a letter worth 11,000 florins. With a mule loaded, a letter of introduction sealed in green wax against your chest, a purse, an actual purse with actual florins, your first, sewn inside your doublet, and the whole strange family of the house around you. Monna Tessa pressing a parcel of food into your hands, sized for a journey 3 times the length of yours. Matteo, promoted to your stool and insufferable about it and hugging you hard enough to crack ribs. Nanny, Cele, Monna Margherita at the gallery rail with a nod that is worth a paragraph. Ser Lerpo, who shakes your hand with his ruined blue-black one and says, "Enter everything, hide nothing," and lets that be all, because it was always all. And the master, who does not come down, because the master is at his desk where he will die. Years from now, old and unresting mid-letter, the pen an inch from the inkhorn, but whose glazed window you look up at from the mule's back, and the shape behind the green glass lifts one hand, and you ride out of the courtyard of the richest man you will ever know, into the street, into the noise, into the net of promises going. But that is the morning, and the morning is not yet. Come back to the night before, because that is where we will leave you, and it is the right place to be left, your last night in the attic. The pallet, the blanket of cheap Garbo wool that your fingers priced in the dark 2 years ago, and price still, out of habit. The way a musician's hand walks a table. The new boy from Empoli asleep at last across the room, breathing in the ragged, shallow way of children who have cried themselves out. Matteo, whistling faintly through the broken nose, a sound so woven into your nights that silence in Avignon will wake you for a month. The tiles overhead shuffling their endless cards in the spring wind. Your body is doing its nightly ledger. The writing claw, uncramping by slow degrees. The ache across the shoulders that lives where the day's bending lived. Your feet, warm for once, because April. The callus on your middle finger, horn hard, permanent, yours. The first entry in the book of what you are now, and the truest. You're 17. You own a purse, a hand, an eye. A name that a terrible, careful old man has put in writing and sent over mountains. 2 years ago you owned 3 coins and a fear of the 14th stair. Through the wall, faithful as the tiles, the pen. He's writing to Genoa, probably, or Barcelona, or Bruges, or God, or all 4. With him the addresses were never as separate as they are for other men. Tomorrow you will be on the road, and the night after there will be no pen through the wall ever again. And you know already, the way you sometimes know things lying on the exact border of sleep, that you will hear it anyway, all your life, that 40 years from now a stout man with your name and your callus, keeping your own books in your own house with your own boys asleep under your own tiles, you will still, on certain nights, hear that dry scratching just past the edge of the lamplight, and it will not frighten you. It will sound like being kept. Let the arithmetic go now. It doesn't balance tonight. It never balanced, not once. Not the wages of the drowned against the saffron. Not the gate at San Gallo against the 3 florins in the small chest. not the camel against the needle, not the boy who rode with the flower against the ones who watched the wealth ride out. You carried the columns as far as they go. Some accounts are settled in a currency that isn't minted yet, and the judge who cannot be bribed keeps his own books, and even the master, even he with all his wax and wool and paper, could do no more at the end than sign everything or at the threshold and walk through with empty hands. Empty hands, boy. That is how everyone crosses. The richest man of his age and the beggar on her church step in her ghost crimson cloak through the same narrow gate at the same toll, which is everything, which is nothing. So put it down, all of it. You have entered everything and hidden nothing, and the day is closed. The bells are ringing Compline somewhere south, small and far, San Pier Maggiore or the Badia. You know their voices apart, even half asleep, and after tomorrow you will learn new bells, French bells, and forget these, and then one day, old, you will hear a recorded ghost of a Tuscan bell in some impossible future device, and your eyes will sting and you will not be able to say why. The city is settling. The shutters are barred, the books are locked behind 3 locks, the strong box is bolted to the floor, the mice are working their small night shift in the walls, the Arno is running dark under its 4 bridges past the cold dye vats that will steam again at dawn. 100,000 souls are lying down in the bowl of the valley, each under their own weight of tomorrow, the carders and the consuls, the fry cook's brother nanny above his warehouse with his old quarrel unsettled and his wool dry, the master over his last inch of candle, and you, and every one of them held, whether they know it or not, in the same net of kept promises, which is frayed and unjust and stained all the way through and holding. Centuries will pass. The house you are sleeping in will change hands and names and finally stones. The wool trade will move north, and then everywhere, and then into machines whose noise would stop your heart. The florin will vanish, and its grandchildren will be numbers made of light, moving through the air over the mountains faster than any Scasella rider ever dreamed, and they will still be what Ser Lapo showed you under the pillar, promises written down, worth exactly the men who keep them. The dome will be finished, it will be finished, the goldsmith's boy will do it, and it will stand over the valley for 600 years and more, russet in the evening light, and people will cross the world just to stand under it and feel small in the particular warm way you felt small on the tower. The plague will lose its wars one by one, so slowly no single generation will notice the winning. The gates will come down. The word for a broken bench will soften into a form and a filing, and the ledgers, the actual books, the white leather, the green wax, the master's 150,000 letters in his terrible racing hand, they will survive, because he could throw nothing away, and they will sit in an archive in a hill town in Tuscany, and scholars in centuries you cannot imagine will read your master's midnight arguments with God, and read the alms book, and find in a fair young hand a fallen family's name written out in full, and wonder briefly about the clerk who wrote it, and turn the page. But people will still lie down at night the way you're lying down now, still count what they own and what they owe in the dark, and fail to balance it and sleep anyway, still hand the same sentence down through attic darkness. It gets easier, still a lie the night it's said, still true by spring. Some things don't change. The tiredness of a working body at the end of a long day doesn't change. The need to be kept by a wall, a wage, a net, a pen scratching faithfully on the far side of a wall, that doesn't change either. You've earned this rest, not because the accounts closed, because you carried them honestly while they were yours to carry. So let it come. Let the pen through the wall write on without you. Let the bells finish, and the wind have the tiles, and the mice have the walls. Let your hand uncramp, finger by finger, the claw opening like something blooming very slowly in the dark. Let the road wait. It is good at waiting. It has waited under the mountains 1,000 years for you and will still be there at dawn. Let the columns rest unbalanced. Let the city keep itself tonight. Your eyes are heavy. The border is close, the one you can never quite catch yourself crossing, no matter how many nights you try. The last thing you hear is the pen, or maybe the wind. It has stopped mattering which, and then nothing. Just the long, slow drift. Just rest. Good night.